Well, we're delighted to be here, and we've got a very interesting topic today that has been popping up a lot. And we've, I guess, creatively titled it Ransomware Wants Your Recovery Too. And, you know, cybersecurity, you can't, turn your head right or left without hearing about some type of breach, some kind of attack. Just, it's just this pervasive issue that's with us. And really finding that the more creative these adversaries get, the more they seep their way into more of our systems that we're not really thinking about. We might be thinking about firewalls. We might be thinking about endpoint detection. And then you might think, well, gosh, if I'm breached, at least I've got backup. And, I think what we want to talk about today really, having backups does not equate to being able to recover. Not always, not all the time, not in all circumstances. And, I think there's a mismatch. What we've talked about is a mismatch between backup strategy and storage reality. And we're just bumping into this a lot. When we get a phone call to help with incident response, when we sit down with an organization who's revamping their storage architecture, this is something that is not as top of mind as you would think. And we really felt compelled to tackle this today. So Shaheen, talk to me a little bit about this mismatch. Why is there that unequal sign between backup and the storage reality that we've got?
Yeah, when most people are going to think when we say that having backups doesn't necessarily guarantee a successful recovery or a timely one for that matter, automatically assume that means that you haven't gone through testing, which everybody has been telling you for the last 2-3 decades. Make sure you do disaster recovery tests and restore tests, and make sure your backups are good and that you can function from those recoveries. All that's important, and there's a really important set of hygiene things that you have to do to manage backups properly and the whole data lifecycle. But that isn't it. That's really not the problem. I would say that 9 out of 10 incident responses we do, the bad actor has encrypted the backup software and you can't get to it. Doesn't matter how many tests you did. You're not able to recover from it because the backup software is encrypted. And many times the actual storage for the primary backup, if it's not all offsite, is also encrypted. So you're stuck. And we've helped customers set up environments where the backups are going to cloud and the backup software was encrypted, but we were able to spin up a backup software replacement very quickly, point it to cloud, recover the catalogs, and be able to do the recoveries. So having a good strategy around what does it mean to not just test the backups, but ensure that they're immutable, the bad actor can't delete them, that they're in a place that the bad actor can't encrypt. So there's air gapping associated with it, so that if they do compromise your environment and start encrypting all your environment, your systems that are responsible for backup and recovery aren't impacted as well. So that's the first thing is, the unequal sign means there's a lot of factors here beyond, do you have good backups?
Well, right. And I think sometimes you can get misled, right? Backup is where I started in tech so many years ago. And honestly, the thing we worried about then was, when people were making their redundant copies, right? Those copies were winding up in the trunk of a car, in a garage, right? And so it's kind of like, we've come a long way, baby. And so when you start thinking, well, I've got a sophisticated backup system, and there's, like you said, there are all of these different factors that go way beyond maybe the tool you implement. Can you speak to us about, I guess, about what folks ought to be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the storage architecture itself matters. So that's a starting place. Like, people start thinking about backup as the solution that's backing up the storage, but the actual underlying storage architecture is critical. There's some great storage technologies out there that have built-in security features and capabilities and immutability so that you don't have to, and also, the ability to do local snapshots and be able to move those snapshots off the storage system. So for other layers of protection beyond traditional backup, you know, fragmented, outdated, siloed environments are often really difficult to recover. They make the any kind of recovery effort more complicated. So thinking about not just does your storage architecture have the facility for from a functionality perspective to do security, but also if you're using a completely fragmented and multiple different manufacturers, that adds complexity to your ability to recover. The second component is a lot of what the ransomware exploits are starting to take advantage of is storage weaknesses. So they're not even just looking at weaknesses in Windows and Linux and the operating systems from the endpoint perspective. They're actually targeting the SANs and NASs and things like that, looking for blind spots, like, as I mentioned, a lack of immutability or integration gaps or APIs that aren't very protected to try to add functionality with other vendors. And ultimately, if you haven't got recovery plans, so this is where, for decades we've been pounding drums on the disaster recovery talk track. If you haven't got a proper recovery plan, and haven't tested it, it will fail under pressure because there isn't enough practice. It's just like if you're any sport that you're into, if you go for the first time in a year and go out to play the sport, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna stumble a little bit. You're not gonna be on your best game. It's the same thing. If you never practice disaster recoveries, then you're fumbling through what are the steps I have to do again. I need to spin up the server first, or I need to spin up the network first. Do we have spare hardware? Do we have a warm environment? Do we have a cold environment? Those are all factors that need to be thought through. And then starting to move out of the storage world and thinking about data itself, one of the biggest risks or exposures for an environment is data sprawl. Like, how many of you can say you were able to keep all your data on your file servers and your storage systems and nobody has replicated that or copied it to their workstations? How many laptops do you have out in the field that are beyond your firewall that have OneDrive replicated down to their machine? All it takes is being in a coffee shop and a bad actor takes advantage of that. And now they may have, your CFO sitting in a coffee shop or in an airport, and all of the financial data he's replicated local is accessed and taken by the bad actors. They didn't even have to come in your environment. All they had to do was compromise one machine, because it was a lot easier for that individual from a productivity standpoint to replicate files to their system so that they can work on that really critical budget control plan on a plane. And the impact was you got hit with ransomware. So making, if you think about the data risk perspective, data risk assessments and data risk management become really critical things. And, over the last 20 years, we've made it really difficult to do that because the answer was DLP, which is super complicated. It's hard to maintain. You got to classify all your data. You got to have policies and rules about how it's exfiltrated, or if it can be exfiltrated or not. It's a very challenging thing. So there's better approaches to solving that data risk management. And we hopefully by now you're kind of getting the sense that the backup tool by itself isn't enough.
Yes.
Really, you have to architect alignment across the storage system, your data modeling and planning and access levels, and tie in the backup software so that if you do, and it's not a matter of if, it's when you do get hit with ransomware, you don't want to pay the ransom. You don't want to rely on an encryption key. And I'll explain why that's a problem in a moment, but you want to be able to just say, all right, let's clean up the infection from the systems that it's on, and then let's restore our critical systems and get back to work. And the quicker recovery based on RTOs and RPOs you define for your business can be built into the data storage architecture and the backup architecture to get you working quickly. And then tie that all into understanding your data landscape. Where is your critical data? Does it live in a central location, or is it spread out? If it's spread out, how are you protecting it? If it's central, how are you protecting it? And really, it's all about streamlining your storage systems from a heterogeneity perspective and simplifying the backup systems so that you get a single backup solution. There's many enterprises we've talked to that have 10 different backup technologies, and their engineers, know one of them well, but the rest of them are through acquisition. Like, really focus on the data architecture, the storage architecture, and the backup architecture working homogeneously together.
So when I hear you talking about those three categories, in my mind, that's kind of traditional IT, the way that IT has been, right? Those areas that we focus on, and you think of the word ransomware, and you immediately go kind of to the cybersecurity side of the house, right?
Yep.
And often, depending on the size of the company and the maturity and all of that, right, you might have two teams, both handling their areas of responsibility, or maybe it's blended. But I guess my question is, how have you seen these two functions coming together, or are they coming together the way they need to, as IT is really having to factor in, more on their side of the house? How do we prepare and equip as much as the cybersecurity side is? And there's budget shifts that go on, there are team shifts that go on, and how do we make sure those areas are working synchronously, I guess?
Yeah, it's the short answer is there's no new technology here. This is not magic. It is the same old IT stuff we've been talking about. What makes security complicated is that the bad actors have started to outpace IT's ability to keep up. So we have to get specialized, and we have to create special ops teams to be able to deal with the new threat vectors that are coming at us, the new attack categories that we're seeing. And so it's not that there are new attacks every day, but it's not that we have to deal with it. I don't like using the word differently, because we do have to think differently about how we respond, but it's the same blocking and tackling that is preventative, that is going to help us in the right side of boom as opposed to the left side of the boom. On the left side of the boom, we're doing all the proactive measures of trying to make sure we have everything backed up, protected. We got good security tools and controls in place. We've got good incident response plans in place so that we can respond when something happens. On the right side of boom is stuff has happened, and now you got to jump in and put on your flak jacket and get in there and get the fire hose and start putting out the fires and start rebuilding the buildings and the systems and whatever else. So I would say that to get those teams working together, because there is tension between security and IT today. Each of them wants to own the policies and procedures and the controls that make up all of the things I just said. The best way is to figure out how to do a collaborative roundtable. And when you're doing basically tabletop exercises for, here's an incident that happened, here's what goes on, go around the table, what do you do, who's on point, what's then, and if you play those games, run through those scenarios with your teams, it gets them talking and understanding that they can't do it on their own, and they start coming up with ways to address, how do we solve this problem together, because I don't want to lose my job because you didn't do your part, and I don't want you to lose your job because I didn't do my part. And so it becomes a collaborative approach as opposed to the real combative approach that it is today. Naturally, security and IT have fought for decades, and a lot of times the folks in security were IT people that moved into security. Today, we're getting a breed of specialized security people who have never done IT. And so there's a little more tension there because they don't understand what the IT teams have gone through.
Hmm. It made me wonder, as you were talking about the roundtable exercises and things like that. Traditional, I guess, BCDR and the tests and the making sure everything works. And that, well, how do we get systems back online and things like that. But up until the last years, they haven't really had to factor in, well, our data might be exfiltrated somewhere else and held hostage and this, that, and the other. How often do you see in these plans and in these exercises them going all the way to incident response? So, your data is encrypted or there's a ransom. Like, do you see the plans going as far as including who are we going to call? We have them lined up, or is that something that people kind of wait till it happens and then try to figure out who to call?
I remember as a young IT individual way back in the day, I was an architect working at a very large three-letter acronym organization, and it was my responsibility to set up the backup technology for this new infrastructure we were building. I didn't think it was a priority, and I thought my boss didn't know what the heck he was talking about. It was more important for me to finish coding what I was coding than it was to build the backup system. We had the core system that the bat was supposed to be backed up had multiple RAID cards. It had tons of disk in it. It had redundant processors and memory and power and NICs, and everything was redundant. There was nothing that was going to go wrong with that. The boss didn't know what the heck he was talking about. Lo and behold, the RAID cards, both of them, the NV RAM got flashed, and we lost everything. And we lost all data. And as part of trying to fix the NVRAM on the RAID controllers, we made some human mistakes that wiped out what was on the cache, and therefore any chance of recovering was completely gone. And so my team turned around and said, "Thank God you built the backups." That was the moment I realized backups were super, super important. Before that, I thought my boss was an idiot and didn't know what the heck he was talking about. And if you're watching, I'm sorry, you were right. but
Yeah, here you are.
Here I am. So it was from that point forward, and that sort of human nature is kind of the problem. There's a lot of folks who feel like this doesn't affect me. We're fine. When it's a problem, I'll deal with it. I can tell you that was 6 months of development that I lost, and I only had 6 months left in the project to finish it. So I had to make up a year's worth of coding in 6 months, and it was a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of stress. And I started getting these gray hairs when I was 20 something years old. So I strongly recommend looking at this as, I want to take a proactive stance. The things we're talking about aren't going to break the bank. They're simple and good practice approaches to solving technology debt. If you've got a lot of storage systems and you're not investing in getting good storage systems, you're putting yourself and your company at risk by not addressing that problem. So storage architecture is a great way to start. There's some really great storage technologies and partners we can bring to the table to talk about how to help you there. Same thing with the backup technology. There's some backup technologies that have addressed this notion of being able to take the data and put it off site, so you don't have to, you are air gapping it. You don't have this notion of, I lost my system and I can't recover it because all the backups are on-prem and encrypted, or in Bob's trunk overheating from the summer sun. That is not a hyperbole, by the way. Bob is a name I made up, but the rest of that is a true story. And more than one customer, sadly.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and so the last layer of this is really that data risk is people don't really have an idea of where their data is. And again, we've got a phenomenal solution. We have a data risk assessment that can be used to understand where your data is, and also understand the ransomware risk from a financial perspective if they were to get ransomed. And we can tune it to be based on if you're PCI or HIPAA or whatever. All of that can be done for you in a very simple data risk assessment. And then we have a very simple answer to that. Rather than trying to set up policies and trying to figure out how to protect people from getting it, why not just encrypt that data that was found, so that even if it is exfiltrated, it's no good to anybody. So our data risk management solution really addresses the problem in that way. So understand your data, engineer out technical debt in your backup
Mhm.
technology and your storage technology.
Mhm.
And you've really solved all the bullets I talked about today, which is, here's the high level pieces and parts, and I'll write up these bullets and share them with our team so that when we do the follow-up post on this session, that you can see the bullets that I talked
Mhm.
about today.
Mhm.
The I would say the tabletop exercises are the best way to get some collaboration. They can be fun. It can be really boring and annoying, but if you can make it fun, do it like a red team, blue team, have awards for people who come up with the best innovations and identify gaps.
Mhm.
There's ways to make this so that you can educate your team and help them help you
Right.
while collaborating with each other and becoming better employees and co teammates, if you will.
Well, and I think that's such a great point, because if it's your area, right, you naturally don't want your gaps to be revealed, right? You don't want to look bad. You don't want, someone to think that what you've done isn't sufficient. Yet that's exactly what those exercises are created to do. And so rewarding people for finding them and making that the outcome and the goal rather than, okay, I just hope no one finds out I didn't do that backup project for 6 months, right? I mean, because the sooner we find out, the better prepared we are to handle anything that comes our way. So I think that's a great perspective, because I think everyone in IT works so hard, and I don't think that, I would say 99.8% of the people are not doing anything maliciously. They might be doing something because of lack of time or lack of budget or whatever. And those exercises are the perfect place to reveal, where we might need further inspection, further budget, further manpower.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Well, I think as we walk through this, we go back to something we always talk about, which is kind of layered offense, layered defense. And, the fact, like you were saying, when you were talking about storage and things not being enough. And we, in today's day and age, there's an assumption, like you said, that someone is going to get in if they're not in already.
Mm.
And so how do you build those layers that, well, you're protected, and then if that fails, you're protected again, and if that fails, you're protected again. And the fact that we can build those layers not just on the cybersecurity side, but that we can build them throughout the whole IT ecosystem, um, and being able to provide an assessment or an audit to really help people know where to focus that energy to fill the gaps that are most important is I think what we can bring to the table and what we would love to help organizations do.
Agreed.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you to those who have joined us today. Sheen will typically speak to some type of an assessment that we've got that is complementary, and we do that because, quite simply, we want to help. We don't like seeing the bad guys win. And so anything we can do to equip you with actionable information, whether you work with us or not, we want to help do that. So please reach out to us if any of this has piqued your curiosity, or created a larger worry bead in your head than you had. We would love to help out. And with that, we will sign off, and we will see you next month.